Let's discuss the Fighter of the Year contenders. In the past, the previous winners have really been champions or double champs. You know, Alex Pereira won the belt, defended it twice, got Fighter of the Year. Leon Edwards head kicked Kamaru Usman, defended the belt, won Fighter of the Year. Alexander Volkanovski defended the belt twice. Kind of mid, won Fighter of the Year. Usman defended the belt 3 times. Adesanya won the belt, defended it twice. And Daniel Cormier won the belt and also won the heavyweight belt that year as well. So, if you want to be Fighter of the Year, sometimes it's not just straight up wins, it's like the quality of the win itself. Here's all the champions that have defended or won the belt this year. We got Islam, Dricus, JDM, Merab, Volk. All of these champs could potentially win Fighter of the Year. They have big fights on the horizon. Islam's going to fight JDM, so the winner of that immediately is going to catapult to the top of the rankings. Dricus is going to fight Khamzat in his second fight of the year, so if he's able to walk through Khamzat, I mean, he should be mentioned for Fighter of the Year. Merab just beat Umar Nurmagomedov. He's going to fight Sugar Sean O'Malley in a couple weeks. He's going to probably have another title defense after that. So Merab can potentially win Fighter of the Year as well. Then Volk, he just won the belt back after a couple years without it, beating Diego Lopez. If he goes out there and beats the next contender like an Evloev and maybe even gets another title defense after that, Volk can even win Fighter of the Year again. The champions out of the way, let's discuss every undefeated fighter in the UFC this year that has more than one win. Controversially speaking, we're going to start with Mairon Santos. He is 2-0 this year. He has a split decision robbery against Francis Marshall and a close decision victory over Sadiq Youssef. Now, Mairon Santos might be 2-0. This year, might have a couple more fights scheduled, might win those, might be 4-0, but the quality of the victory I don't think is going to elevate him enough to be considered Fighter of the Year. Modestas Bukauskas is also 2-0 this year. He actually has one finish against Rafael Cerqueira and won a very close decision against Jan Cutelaba in a fight where the scorecard said 30-27 Modestas and they also said 30-27 Jan Cutelaba. So Modestas, I don't think he's going to be Fighter of the Year. He could potentially rack up a couple more wins, but ultimately, I don't think his chances are really that high. Blackshear is 2-0 this year in the UFC. He has one finish. He got a Kimura against Cody Gibson. Then he went out there and had a pretty poor decision against Alatang Haley. I don't think Blackshear can win Fighter of the Year based on these performances. You know, a couple years ago when Blackshear was taking fights on 2 weeks' notice, fighting like once every 3 weeks, he could have been Fighter of the Year back then, but now the performances are kind of falling off a little bit, so I'm not really liking Damon's chances here. Nursulton Ruziboev is 2-0 in the UFC this year. He has one finish against a short notice Eric McConaughey. You know, he did what he had to do. He KO'd the short finish regional opponent, and you know, there's not really much to say there. Then he goes out there and wins a decision against Dustin Stoltzfus in a fight where I watched it back a couple times. I think Dustin Stoltzfus won that fight, but regardless, you know, that could just be me, you know, doing revisionist history because I want my bet to hit. Dustin Stoltzfus was like plus 240, made it a razor close decision, yada yada yada. Nursulton Ruziboev is 2-0, no fight scheduled next. I doubt he wins Fighter of the Year. You need finishes to be considered Fighter of the Year. You need to have championship aspirations. And I don't think Ruziboev really has those at this point. Jasmine Jasudavicius is 2-0 this year with wins against ranked opponents in both fights. She cleanly beat Mayra Silva, and then she goes out there and submits Jessica Andrade in round 1. I think Jasmine Jasudavicius, if she keeps this up, you know, one more fight, and then she gets a title fight, and then maybe even potentially wins the title, I think Jasmine, low-key, you don't really see female fighters of the year, but Jasmine, if she keeps this up, her next fight is, you know, we don't know what it's going to be yet, but if it's a top-ranked contender and she wins that and then get the title fight, I think Jasmine can easily win Fighter of the Year based on the performances she's put on so far and based on where her career is trajecting to be. Marco Tulio is 2-0 in the UFC this year. He has 2 knockouts in the first 2 rounds in both fights. We don't know when his next fight's going to be, but I would assume they're going to give him someone close to the rankings, and if he goes out there and demolishes that person, then at that point they're going to probably give him someone in the rankings. So if Marco Tulio can go 4-0 this year with 4 finishes, it's going to be hard to deny him Fighter of the Year. It is against low-level opponents, so sometimes they look at the strength of schedule, and they might tend to say, hey, you don't really deserve Fighter of the Year. Like, for example, Kevin Holland in 2020 went, I think, 5-0 in the UFC, but wasn't considered fighter of the year because the people he was fighting and beating were not really ranked, not really the best competition. Marco Tulio kind of falls into that category. So I think if he gets a couple more first round finishes, he would be in talks. But the level of opponent, I don't think it's going to put him there. Azamat Bekoev is 2-0 in the UFC this year with 2 round 1 knockouts. Now, I think he has a better chance than Marco Tulio because I think Bekoev's next fight is potentially someone in the rankings. Middleweight is a little dry right now, you know, not really a lot of movement. So someone like Bekoev, they might just shove towards like a top 10, top 15 opponent for his next fight. If he goes out there and wins that, then all of a sudden his next fight after that will be in the top 5. And then at that point, if Bekoev goes out there and finishes his next 2 opponents and they're both in the rankings, he's already 2-0 with 2 first-round finishes. I think Bekoev could have a shot, an outside chance at being fighter of the year. He just needs to remain active and keep getting finishes, but I think where his career is trajecting towards, I think he can do it. Melky Costa is the only UFC fighter this year that is 3-0. 3 straight fights fought in the UFC, and he has not lost a single one. The only problem is he only has 1 finish. Finish came against Andre Fili. He then decisioned Christian Rodriguez. He decisioned Julian Erosa in fights that were pretty close. So even though Melky Costa might remain active, he could potentially go 5-0, 6-0 this year. But if he's just putting mid performances to get to the finish line, I don't think that's going to get him fighter of the year. However, Melky Costa's next fight should be a ranked opponent, and if he beats them, then his fight after that should be an even higher ranked opponent. At that point, he'd be 5-0 with 2 wins over ranked opponents. So maybe he could be in talks, but I'm getting the similar vibe of Kevin Holland, where it's strength of schedule. You know, he's not fighting top 10 guys. But 3-0 is pretty impressive in the UFC in 1 year, and we're not even halfway through the year. Gene Silva, now we're getting into real contender talks. Gene Silva, 2-0 this year with 2 finishes, 1 against a ranked guy, and Bryce Mitchell submitted him in round 2. And Gene Silva just puts on highly entertaining fights. That's the end of the story, really. And Gene Silva's next fight is going to definitely be someone in the top 10, if not top 12 of the featherweight division. So if Gene Silva goes out there in his next fight and finds a finish against a top 10 guy, he'll be 3-0 with 3 finishes, 2 against ranked guys, and at that point, they might just shove him to the title shot. So if Gene Silva can go out there, win his next fight against a ranked guy, then they give him a title shot, and he wins the title shot, Gene Silva would without a doubt be fighter of the year. I think he has a pretty good chance. He's remaining active. The crowd loves him. The UFC loves him. Why not just keep putting Gene Silva on cards? It makes it 10 times more entertaining, so I think Gene Silva has a very good chance at winning Fighter of the Year. The last fighter we'll be talking about is Reinier De Ridder. He is 2-0 in the UFC this year. Now, Reinier De Ridder is an interesting case because he was double champ in ONE FC. He comes over later in his career in his mid-30s, and he goes out there, submits Kevin Holland in round 1, which in hindsight, not the most impressive performance. You know, it's very easy to submit Kevin Holland if you have good BJJ chops. But, alas, running through Kevin Holland, it's got to give you some brownie points. Then he goes out there and finishes Bo Nickel, completely fraud checks him in round number 2, dominated the fight from start to finish. It wasn't like a fluke KO. He just dominated that fight. Now, main reason why I have Reinier De Ridder so high up on this list as my number 1 contender for Fighter of the Year is his next fight is already scheduled. Out of all these guys, Reinier De Ridder actually has a fight scheduled. It's against Robert Whittaker. So if Reinier De Ridder is able to go out there and finish Robert Whittaker, who's top 5 middleweight, is just perennially in the title contentions talks, Reinier De Ridder will be 3-0 with 3 finishes against 3 ranked guys, one of them being nearly the number 1 contender in Robert Whittaker. And at that point, they might just give him a title shot, or they might give him someone like Kyle Borralho or someone like Imavov, someone around the top 3. And if Reinier De Ridder goes out there and wins that, I don't know how you can't say he's not Fighter of the Year. I think it's going to depend on the performance against Robert Whittaker. It's a lot of eyes are going to be on that. Hamza was able to run through him in round 1, so Reinier De Ridder, similar style. I would imagine Reinier De Ridder can find a finish at some point on the ground against Whittaker. So if he's able to do that, I think Reinier De Ridder can be Fighter of the Year. Now, I did leave some people off this list, like Ilia Topuria. He could potentially win Fighter of the Year. He's moving up to lightweight, fighting Charles Oliveira. for the lightweight title in a couple weeks. Valentina Shevchenko defended her belt against Manon Fiorot and is going to potentially fight Zhang Weili in a super fight for the double champ status. So Valentina Shevchenko could potentially be fighter of the year as well. And Magomed Ankalaev, I didn't really bring up. He did beat Alex Pereira for the belt, but I don't think he's going to be that active this year. I think he's going to fight Alex Pereira in the rematch in like Abu Dhabi in like October. So if that's his next fight and he's 2-0 and both wins against Alex, I don't really think you can consider Magomed Ankalaev for fighter of the year.